We can see that convection is being defined by the recursive function or the virtual space, and not really being described in a sense of any movement or momentum as imputed convective to the information dwelling on the surface. In this sense, we could refer to the surface of the mirrors, the makeup of the reflective surface, the plane, as molecules. And this would require us to redefine the word molecule to really read a no-charge electrically neutral plane of reflection, or surface that can reflect. All points on the surface, whether considerately infinitesimal, Planck unit, or expansive, many Planck units spread across the screen, can reflect. And each point, or the sum of all the reflective potential points on the mirror that do reflect, can represent molecule or molecules. In this sense, we can refer to two or more atoms, or as it concerns the recursive matrix, actually an infinite recursive copying of atoms, as two or more reflective surfaces held together or connected due to the information existing between them. So in a sense, we can refer to the geometry that forms on the surface of the right mirror as an atom, and the geometry that forms on the left side on the surface, an atom. And these atoms actually are represented on the mirror itself. So the molecular aspect is the actual plane of reflection. The atom represents the geometry that appears, or the light information that appears on the surfaces of the mirrors. So in a sense, we can refer to this as atomic spooky action at a distance. We most certainly can do that as it concerns the recursive, because when the atomic geometry forms on the surface and then is subsequently copied through recursion on both sides, and due to the interaction and the entanglement and the equilibrium and the relationship between the information on the right side and information on the left side as communicating back and forth, then we can refer to this as really atomic spooky action at a distance. So the so-called chemical bond represents not some literal chemical bond or solid, fluid, liquid relationship. We're referring to reflective information, and they're bonded to each other due to the fact that they're reflecting to and from each other and reflecting the same information in the open part of the string. So the so-called chemical bond just is really describing a relationship between information on one reflective surface as it is related to and entangled with the information on another surface, or one atom as related to the other atom, or one recursive infinite chain lattice of atoms corresponding to and related to, in a very real sense, the information of another timeline or matrix of atomic structures representing recursion. So the so-called chemical bond would represent the open part of the string. All of the information on the surface of the right side and recursion, and all the information on the surface of the left side and recursion, is derived from the information in the open part of the string, the real object. Take the real object away, all chemical bonds are broke. Recursion breaks down, all the information disappears. So the chemical bond, or we could actually refer to it as the Higgs branch, is the information in the open part of the string that's communicated to all the static copies, perpetuations of that information as it's expressed reflectively and recursively. So that exists in the open part of the string, and really just merely represents information that we cannot see, dark energy, the open part of the string, the quantum side of the equations, that's being communicated, transmuted, reflected to information, and where both molecular surfaces comprised of information representing atomic information implanted on the screen are reflecting this same open part, or this Higgs branch, or this bonding of one reflective surface to the other, and all recursion. Let's see what my time looks like here. So if we consider the mirror-to-mirror analogy, we can see that the so-called molecules or molecular framework represents the surface of the plane itself and not the information reflected to the surface. In other words, the molecule represents the mirror itself, the plane, a reflective potential. It doesn't represent, the molecule doesn't represent the information that's reflected or the image on the surface. So this would state that molecules represent a neutral, no electrical charge, point, or volumes or points, bits, of a reflective surface. These molecular reflective points are related to Planck units. However, the volume of information versus necessarily the quality of the screen itself, which at this point is ambiguous, but we're going to discuss how these reflective surfaces can most certainly fit into the category of the dark matter. That's not fully understood at this point. But however, the volume of information that's reflected to the screen is electrically charged. In other words, the mirror itself is not electrically charged, but as a reflective surface, once information, heat, light, energy reflects to it, then it's the information that lights up the screen that becomes electrically charged. The plane itself remains neutrally charged. It's the information that's electrically charged. For instance, an electron would represent maybe the open part of the string, the quantum side, and when it's reflected to the surface of the mirror, then the image or the reflected information would be an opposite charged proton. And of course, protons, once two atomic volumes of information right and left come into relativity, recursion starts, then we can see that the proton can be perpetuated infinitely, and that all protons, all represented protons in the recursion and on the surface, is actually representing that the quantum or the particle can be represented down the chain infinitely at all points the same. So this represents that the plane surface may or may not receive this electrically charged information to the whole of its surface, and rather only portions of it. In other words, you've got a whole mirror, and you have an object sitting in front of it. The object won't reflect to the whole surface of the mirror. It only reflects to certain points, comprised a certain area of that main surface, or the whole dimensions of the mirror. So the plane surface, which represents the molecular structure, the dark matter candidate, may or may not receive the electrically charged information, may or may not light up with information. A real object may not reflect as an image on the surface. And this again goes back into the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that a neutral charged dark matter plane that cannot be seen unless it's lit up with information, so long as it's not lit up or reflected information, then it remains a neutrally charged potential for information to light up its surface, and therefore that information represent an electrically charged volume of space on the mirror. And I'll continue this discussion in the next video.